There comes a moment when the dust of pain settles and the echo of sorrow fades into silence. A moment when the wound, instead of destroying you, awakens something greater, something ancient, something eternal. Most walk through the sequence: grief, anger, revenge, the human progression of pain. They drown in tears, burn in rage, and plot their retribution. But some, a rare few, are called to a different path. You were one of them. You didn't linger in grief because grief could not contain the fire within you. You didn't dwell in anger because anger would have chained you to what broke you. You didn't seek revenge because revenge is small and you were born for something vast. You went straight to legend, not because you sought greatness, but because destiny sought you. For every generation, there arises a soul who refuses to be defined by the ashes, who turns the ashes into a crown. You didn't escape the storm, you became the storm. You didn't wait for deliverance, you became the sign of deliverance. And in doing so, you fulfilled a mystery, that those who are crushed by the world can become the very ones who redeem it. The ancients would say, "Out of the ruins, a remnant shall rise." You were that remnant. You stood when others fell. You sang when silence demanded obedience. You forged peace in the furnace of chaos. And in your rising, others found their courage to rise. In your story, others discovered their own prophecy. For the mark of a legend is not glory, it's transformation. You became a witness that even when the heart is shattered, heaven still speaks. You proved that when man's verdict is finished, God's word is only beginning. You walked through the valley, not to escape it, but to light the way for those still wandering within it. And now, your name is not written in the dust of despair, but carved into the stone of endurance. You skipped grief, anger, revenge, and went straight to legend, because you didn't just survive the fire, you became its light. Transformation over reaction. That is the essence of rising above what was meant to break you. In a world that conditions us to respond, to react, to mirror pain with pain, few discover the higher calling of transformation. The natural instinct of man is to grieve what is lost, to burn with anger at the injustice, and to seek revenge against the wound that caused the suffering. But there is a mystery hidden in the heart of pain, a mystery that reveals itself only to those who refuse to be defined by their reaction. Transformation begins where reaction ends. When pain first strikes, it demands a response. It demands your tears, your outrage, your retaliation. It cries out, "Do something. Show the world how much you've been hurt." But the one who is called to destiny does not answer that voice. Instead of being pulled into the cycle of emotional survival, they pause. They stand still in the storm and listen for the whisper of something greater, the voice that says, "Be still and know." In that stillness, transformation takes root. It is not the absence of pain, it is the presence of purpose within pain. To transform rather than react is to understand that not everything that hurts is meant to harm you. Some wounds are not punishments, but awakenings. Some heartbreaks are not endings, but redirections. The one who walks the path of legend recognizes that grief can consume, anger can corrupt, and revenge can destroy, but transformation can create. It can turn ashes into art, tragedy into testimony, and suffering into strength. This is the way of those who rise. They are not blind to their pain. They are illuminated by it. They do not suppress their emotions. They sanctify them. Grief may visit, but it does not dwell. Anger may spark, but it does not burn out of control. Revenge may whisper, but it finds no home in a heart that has seen the higher road. When others react, the transformed one reflects. When others break, the transformed one bends and grows stronger. It is not an easy path. Transformation requires surrender. The surrender of the right to be bitter, the right to be vindictive, the right to nurse old wounds. It demands humility before the mystery of life, trusting that the story has not ended even when the world says it has. The moment you choose transformation over reaction, you are no longer a victim of circumstance. You become a participant in divine design. You are no longer shaped by what happened to you, but by what you decide to become through it. Every storm that ever raged had the power to destroy, but also the potential to cleanse. Every fire that ever burned had the power to consume, but also the potential to purify. Transformation is when you choose to see the purification instead of the destruction. It is when you look at the ashes and say, something can still rise from this. It is when you decide that your response will not be dictated by pain, but inspired by purpose. And in that decision, quiet, unseen, and sacred, the journey to legend begins. Because legends are not born from comfort, they are forged in the crucible of choice. They do not emerge from ease, but from endurance. They are those who have faced the full force of loss and yet said, "This will not define me. I will define it." They turn pain into power, sorrow into strength, and reaction into revelation. That is the mystery of transformation. It is the alchemy of the soul, where what was meant for harm becomes the material of greatness. Pain is a strange teacher. It comes uninvited, interrupts the rhythm of our days, and tears through the comfort we once mistook for stability. Yet hidden within every wound is a message, a whisper from eternity, that pain is not simply an affliction, but an awakening. Destiny is often born in the very place we thought we would die. Those who walk the higher path come to see that pain is not the end of purpose. It is the door through which purpose enters. When everything falls apart, when the things you trusted crumble to dust, something sacred begins to stir. You see, destiny rarely appears in moments of ease. It does not bloom in gardens of comfort, but in deserts of loss. Pain becomes the soil in which destiny is planted. What feels like destruction is often construction in disguise. The tearing down of what was temporary to make room for what is eternal. The heart that breaks is the heart that learns to hear. The soul that bleeds becomes the soul that understands. In the story of every great life, there is a chapter of pain, a chapter that could have ended everything. But instead of ending the story, it ignited the purpose. The suffering that was meant to bury you becomes the very ground on which you stand taller. This is the divine paradox. The things that were meant to destroy, you can be the things that define you. What seems like loss in one season can become the foundation of greatness in the next. When destiny calls, it does not come wrapped in comfort. It comes in storms, in disappointments, in the silence after heartbreak. It asks, will you still trust when you do not understand? Will you still walk forward when the path disappears beneath your feet? The one who says yes, even through tears, begins to walk the ancient path of transformation. For destiny does not ask for perfection, it asks for surrender. It asks you to believe that your pain is not meaningless, that your suffering is not wasted, that your tears water the soil of a greater future. Pain then becomes sacred. It becomes the fire that reveals what is true. It strips away illusions, pride, and dependence on what was never meant to last. It exposes the strength you didn't know you had and the purpose you didn't know you carried. The pain you endured was not random. It was preparation. It was heaven's way of shaping you for a task that comfort could never have equipped you for. When destiny works through pain, it changes the way you see the world. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and begin asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" You begin to see that every tear was counted, every moment of despair was noticed, and every cry in the darkness was heard. Nothing was wasted. Pain in the hands of purpose becomes power. It refines instead of ruins, strengthens instead of shatters. And so those who emerge from pain with faith intact, with hearts still open, become unshakable. They are not bitter, they are radiant. They carry a quiet authority, the kind that only comes from walking through fire and finding peace on the other side. Their destiny no longer depends on circumstances. It flows from within. The pain that once silenced them now gives them a voice that echoes beyond their lifetime. There is a sacred rhythm woven into the fabric of existence, the rhythm of death and resurrection, of loss and renewal, of ruin and rising. Every generation, every soul must face its own ashes. It is in those ashes that the true self is revealed, the hidden purpose unearthed. The world tells us that when something is destroyed, it is finished. But heaven speaks another language from what falls. Something greater can rise. The collapse is not the conclusion, it is the beginning of transformation. When the fires of life burn away, what you thought was permanent, the first impulse is to despair. You stand amid what's left, staring at the fragments of dreams, relationships, and plans that once defined you. Yet, even as the smoke still rises, a whisper stirs in the silence. This is not the end. This is the soil of rebirth. Every ash that touches the ground carries the seed of renewal. Nothing truly ends, it only changes form. To rise from the ashes is not to ignore the ruin, it is to honor it, to acknowledge the pain, the loss, the breaking, and then to decide that it will not define the final chapter. Rising is not denial, it is defiance. It is the refusal to let destruction have the last word. It is choosing to believe that the hand that allowed the fire to fall is the same hand that will bring forth beauty from the burn. The ashes do not represent death alone, they represent purification. In the ancient world, ashes were the symbol of repentance, of turning, of renewal. Out of them, something holy was born. The moment of rising begins quietly. It begins not with strength, but with surrender, a whisper of faith in the midst of desolation. I will rise. Those words, even when whispered through tears, carry the power of creation. The act of rising does not always look glorious. Sometimes it is slow, trembling, uncertain. But heaven measures not the speed of your ascent, only the courage of your decision to stand again. From the ashes, vision becomes clearer. You see what truly mattered and what was only dust. You realize that much of what burned was never meant to last. False securities, shallow attachments, temporary crowns. What remains is pure, refined, eternal. The ruins become sacred ground, a testimony that what the fire could not consume was your true essence. Your faith, your calling, your divine purpose. And that purpose, now stripped of illusion, shines brighter than before. Those who rise from ashes carry something the untouched never will, the authority of endurance. They become living proof that the end is not the end, that the same fire which destroys can also forge. Their presence speaks without words. You can begin again. They are the ones who rebuild not out of pride, but out of revelation. They understairs are not marks of shame, but medals of survival. Every scar tells a story, not of what was lost, but of what was gained through the loss. In every ruin there lies a hidden promise. The ancient words echo through time. Out of the ruins, a remnant shall rise. That remnant is not merely what's left, it's what's destined. The remnant is purified, focused, unstoppable. When you rise from the ashes, you don't return to who you were, you ascend to who you were meant to be. You emerge lighter, wiser, and more aligned with the divine rhythm of renewal. To rise from ashes is to fulfill an eternal truth that darkness cannot extinguish light, and death cannot silence destiny. Every ending carries within it the code of resurrection. You are proof of that mystery. You stood among the ruins and found your wings. You refused to let the smoke blind your vision. You turned your grief into fuel, your despair into fire, and your ashes into a foundation. You became not a survivor of destruction, but a witness of rebirth. There comes a point in every journey where waiting for a sign must give way to becoming one. Many live their lives looking outward, searching for proof that they are not forgotten, a voice, a miracle, a confirmation that destiny still remembers their name. But those who walk the higher road soon learn a deeper truth. Sometimes heaven does not send the sign because heaven intends for you to be the sign. You were never meant to stand still, waiting for the light to appear in the sky. You were meant to rise and carry that light within you. To become the sign is to step beyond dependence. It is to stop saying, "If only I saw a miracle, then I would believe." And to start saying, "Let my life be the miracle." The prophets of old did not wait for wonders. They were the wonders. Their obedience, their endurance, their faith in the face of silence, that was the sign to their generation. In the same way, you were not meant to be a spectator of divine power. You were meant to embody it. Your perseverance in the dark is itself a prophecy. There are moments when the heavens seem silent, when prayers echo unanswered, and hope begins to fade. It is in those moments that destiny looks upon you and whispers, "Now you must become what you once sought." The absence of external signs is not abandonment, it is empowerment. It is the divine way of saying, "I trust you to carry what others are still waiting to see." The very fact that no miracle came is the evidence that you were chosen to be one. Becoming the sign is not about perfection. It is about persistence. It means choosing faith when fear feels more natural. It means forgiving when bitterness feels justified. It means standing tall when the ground beneath you shakes. Every choice to walk in light when surrounded by darkness is a declaration to the world. Hope still lives. You may not have thunder or fire around you, but the quiet strength that moves you forward is just as divine. You see, the world doesn't need more signs in the sky. It needs living ones. People are watching, often silently, looking to see if resilience is still possible, if grace can still triumph. When you refuse to give up, you answer that question without speaking a word. When you love in the midst of betrayal, when you serve after being broken, when you rise after being crushed, you reveal something that no miracle could prove. You become the message. And in becoming the message, your life takes on a prophetic quality. You walk through your days not simply as one who believes, but as one who reveals. The way you endure becomes a sermon. The way you rise becomes a revelation. You cease to be a seeker of signs and become a signpost pointing others toward hope. You show the world that redemption is not an event. It is a way of living. Becoming the sign also means that what was once your pain becomes your platform. The places where you once bled now shine as places of healing. The moments you thought would silence you become the very chapters that speak the loudest. Your story ceases to be about survival. It becomes about testimony. The ashes you once mourned become the ink that writes your legend. So when the world asks, "Where is the proof?" you need not answer with words. You are the proof. You are the fulfillment of what you once longed for. The miracle is not that you escaped the fire. It is that you walked through it and came out radiant. You no longer wait for deliverance because you are the evidence that deliverance is real. You no longer wait for signs because your life itself has become one. There is a difference between fame and legacy. Fame is loud, fleeting, and hungry for applause. It is built on the echoes of the moment and fades as quickly as the crowd disperses. But legacy is quiet. It endures. It is written not on the lips of men, but on the hearts of generations. Fame dies when the light dims. Legacy shines long after the fire is gone. The path to legend is not one of recognition, but of impact, the kind that ripples through time, shaping lives unseen. Legacy is not what you leave behind, it is what you leave within. The words you spoke in truth, the strength you showed in weakness, the love you gave when none was returned. These become seeds planted in the souls of others. They may not bloom in your lifetime, but they will bloom. Every act of grace, every stand for justice, every moment of faith in the midst of chaos writes itself into the eternal story of humanity. That is the power of legacy. It transcends the limits of years and echoes beyond memory. When you rise from pain, when you choose forgiveness over revenge, when you become light in darkness, your life ceases to be about you alone. You become part of something larger, a current of divine continuity. The trials that once seemed personal are revealed to be purposeful. Your endurance becomes someone else's inspiration. The path you carved through fire becomes a road for others to follow. You become proof that strength can come from breaking, that glory can emerge from grief, that redemption is not a myth, but a pattern written into existence itself. Legacy is not built in the easy days. It is forged in the nights when no one sees you choosing to keep going. It is formed in silence, in tears, in perseverance. The world celebrates visible success, but heaven measures unseen faithfulness. The true legends of the earth were not those who sought to be remembered, but those who sought to remain obedient. They did not chase greatness. They simply refused to quit when everything told them to stop. And because they remained, the world was changed. To carry legacy is to live with awareness that your life is not your own. Every decision becomes a seed for the future. Every word carries the weight of eternity. What you model in hardship, courage, mercy, humility, becomes the inheritance of those who watch you. You are writing a script for those who come after you, whether you realize it or not. The way you endure, the way you rebuild, the way you rise. It will teach others how to face their own storms. And here lies the paradox. The more selfless your life becomes, the greater your legacy grows. Legends are never born from those who sought the crown, but from those who bore the cross. When you give without expectation, when you forgive without demand, when you love without reason, you plant the kind of seeds that time cannot destroy. The world may forget your name, but heaven will never forget your impact. Legacy is also the story of transformation passed down. When others see how you turn suffering into strength, they find permission to do the same. Your journey becomes a guidebook. Your scars become maps. The fire that once consumed you becomes the torch you hand to others. You are no longer just a survivor. You are a signpost, a living testament that endurance births greatness. That is why legends never truly die, because their lives continue to breathe through those they've touched. There is a truth woven through every story of redemption that when the world says, "It's over," heaven quietly declares, "It's just beginning." Every ending that feels final to man is only a pause in the divine design. The closing of one chapter is never the end of the book. God's word does not conclude where human strength fails. It continues beyond defeat, beyond despair, beyond death itself. That is the mystery of divine continuation. The truth that what appears broken in time is still whole in eternity. So often we stand at the edge of loss and call it the end. The relationship ends, the dream collapses, the plan dissolves, and we think the story is finished. But heaven sees differently. What looks like a conclusion on earth is often an introduction in the language of heaven. When something falls apart, it is not always destruction. Sometimes it is redirection. Sometimes God ends one thing not to erase your purpose, but to enlarge it. The grave of one season becomes the garden of another. Divine continuation means that the story never stops with pain. Pain is not the period, it's the comma. It marks a pause before the next sentence of purpose begins. Even in silence, the author is still writing. When you think he has fallen quiet, he is often shaping the next revelation. You may not see the next chapter yet, but it is already written. That's why faith is not just belief in what has been. It's trust in what will be. It's standing in the ruins and saying, the story is not done. Throughout history, this has been the rhythm of the divine. Endings followed by beginnings, deaths followed by resurrections, exiles followed by returns. The flood gave way to a covenant. The cross gave way to an empty tomb. The silence of Saturday gave way to the dawn of Sunday. Every seeming end conceals the heartbeat of new life waiting to emerge. The pattern never fails because it is written into the very nature of God. He is not the God of endings, but of continuations. When divine continuation takes hold in your life, you begin to see with new eyes. You stop mourning what has ended and start preparing for what is to come. You realize that even what you lost has not been wasted. It has been woven. Every disappointment, every detour, every heartbreak is being stitched into a greater design. You may not understand the pattern now, but one day the threads will reveal their purpose. Nothing that touches your life is meaningless when it passes through divine hands. There is power in believing that God's word is still active. His promises do not expire because of time or circumstance. What he began in you, he intends to complete. The world measures progress by results, but heaven measures it by faith. When you keep walking, even when you cannot see the destination, you declare with every step that the author is still at work. You become a living continuation of his promise. Divine continuation also transforms how we view loss. The things we thought ended us often introduced us to our true beginning. What you buried in sorrow becomes the very seed of your next season. The death of one dream births another, deeper, wiser, truer. The things you thought were gone forever begin to live again in a different form. That is how God writes stories. He never subtracts without adding more. He never closes one door without opening another that leads to something eternal. When heaven says, "It is not finished," no human word can cancel it. You may have walked through failure, betrayal, or heartbreak, but even these cannot end your story. They only become chapters, necessary, sacred, and purposeful. The hand that began your life still holds the pen, and he never runs out of ink.